Welcome, everybody. This is Beer Guys Radio. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Colm, you'll notice a little bit of repetition here because we say hello to our live stream, then we go into the actual quote-unquote podcast recording. So just to let you know there. But y'all, thanks for joining us. As you see, we've got a special guest with us here this week. We have Colm O'Connor. He is here just hot off the presses, hot off the plane from Ireland with the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. We're going to talk some about Guinness here for St. Patrick's Day this year. As always, if you have a question, comment, especially now if you want to ask anything about Guinness, you know, if he can answer it without breaking trade secrets, I'm sure he'd be happy to do that. So we're going to get into the show here. But again, drop a comment in there. Let us know what you're drinking. And thanks so much for joining us. Welcome, everybody, to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Thanks for grabbing a pint with us, having a conversation, just hanging out. It's a good time when we do that. I am Tim Dennis. Brian Hewitt, you're here with us, and I'm actually going to introduce our guest first. We have Colm O'Connor, and he is from the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. Colm flew to the U.S. to join us exactly for that. Actually, is his total reason for the trip was joining Beer Guys Radio. But Colm, how are you this evening, sir?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Good, man. Doing great. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, we talk about Guinness on our St. Patrick's Day show every year. Of course we do. But I think this is the first time that we've had someone, you know, join us from Guinness. We'll be able to get the inside scoop there. So we really appreciate that.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, Brian, we're going to start here with our beers of the week. Colm, I know you just got settled. Do you have a pint? Did you get time to grab a pint?
I haven't had time. Well, we'll remedy that. I was straight after this. But
Gotcha. Brian, what do you have on deck for today?
So I always pregame, and I was digging through my fridge looking for my Guinness because obviously I was going to drink Guinness on this show, and I saw an Oscar Blues Death by Coconut, and I just happened to notice on it. It's an Irish style porter with coconut and chocolate. So I'm like, all right, that's I'm drinking that. So I was drinking that while I was running around getting things set up. Then I drank a Guinness Zero because that way I could have another beer and not get too affected before the show goes on. But right now I've just got a proper Guinness, Guinness draft. Yep. And later on, after I get done with this, I have this is an interesting thing. I was looking into this Guinness original extra stouts that I've had around here for a little while, and I noticed that there's a version. I was checking on Untapped. I've got obviously the Canada US version, and I was looking in the description, and each one of these versions has a different ABV. It's the lowest in Germany. We've got what is it? US is 5%, and up and over in Australia and Japan, it's 6%. So this particular version is different depending on where you live and where you're listening to the show. So I'll be getting into that when I'm done with this. So that is my plan, Tim. And I think I saw that you actually have a beer
I do. So that's Colm. I call it the doctor's orders period of my life. I do limit my alcohol intake now, so it doesn't agree with me as well. But that doesn't mean that I can't join for a pint of Guinness here because I do have the Guinness Zero. So I'm enjoying that. I do have me a nice creamy pint here as well. So life is good.
Can I ask, how do you rate it as a non-alc beer?
So as far as non-alcoholic beers in general go, I think it's very good. I do personally notice the difference, and I think in the texture a lot, a little bit in the flavor, a little sharper to me than an actual Guinness. And, we heard something about, have you heard of people doing what they call a 60-40?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we heard about that recently. So I think our producer Nate tried that, and y'all have noticed Nate's not with us tonight. He had another engagement. But the 60-40, I haven't got a chance to try that yet. But Brian, did you try the 60-40?
I was thinking about doing it today, but this day was so crazy I didn't get to it. I actually have several other Guinness Zeros, and it's on my list of things to do, but I like the idea a lot. I think it's very interesting. It ends up being like 1.5% or like 2% beer, so
there you go.
But at the end of it, if you got cans, and then you have to do a 40-60, so it balances out because you're going to have the opposite once you're done. I think that's how that math works.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah, I hasten to add, it's not a Guinness creation. Obviously, I think it was actually a bar in Dublin, some bar in Dublin, that came up with that particular idea, and I think it kind of went viral across the social sphere. But I mean, for us, it's either one or the other. I mean, the zero itself, what I think really hits the point is the mouthfeel, that the body, the texture, and the guys in the experimental brew house worked about 10 years on that to perfect it. So it definitely wasn't a whim. They worked long and hard, because we've all had non-alc beers, and some are better than others. I think some of them, personally speaking, kind of fall down on the whole texture and body side of things, whereas I think that the guys have really nailed it with Guinness Zero, and it's proven to be really, really popular now, particularly in Ireland and Europe. And it's pretty much 5% and growing of what we actually brew in the brew house today.
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah.
I've heard people saying anecdotally it's kind of hard to find in some markets. I think it sells really well. Are you noticing like huge sales, or because it's been mentioned a few places, like I couldn't find it anywhere. Now we are coming up on St. Patrick's Day, and people love non-alcoholic beer right now, so I totally get why it might sell out very quickly, but I wasn't sure if the numbers bear that out or not.
Yeah, no, demand is very, very high, at least in Ireland. Obviously people are quite mindful of the kids run in the morning, or they might be going to the gym, or something is big on, or maybe they just want to have a beer in the middle of the day, and they have to get back to work or whatever, so obviously it's it kind of caters to the kind of complicated modern day life that we all live, but it's a fantastic beer. I have to say it's the best non-alc beer I've come across, and I'm not contractually obliged to say that. I'll say that. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's definitely something. If you want to get together with some friends and have a pint, but you can't have alcohol for whatever reason, you're going to be satisfied here. You'll feel good about it, have a good time with it. And that we've got Beer Snob Sean in the chat, and he said that this is the only one that he will regularly pick as a non-alcoholic. So good stuff.
It's one of the few that I think you can find almost everywhere that is reliably good. It's not like watery. I got to say, that's impressive to pretty much nail the mouthfeel when you lose the alcohol. Like that's gone. That's a massive element to how the perception of what a beer feels like when you're drinking it, not just the buzz, but very nicely done with that. It's very hard to replicate. Yeah.
And obviously the expectation is huge. When people see the Guinness name on the can, they expect big things, but I think the guys have really delivered on that. It's a phenomenal beer,
Do you guys do this on draft at all? I know that's something that's okay.
Yeah, we have it on draft. Yeah, we have it on draft at home, but not in the States as of yet. But as I always say, watch the space.
Right.
There obviously is an ever-growing demand, so I would imagine things will change on that front. But next time you guys get over to Ireland, obviously we got to meet up, and I'll take you personally for a pint of Guinness
Zero. That sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something I've heard. I've heard that's difficult. The non-alcoholics that put him on draft because the lack of alcohol, problems with the sanitization of the lines and that. I heard that was a big delay in the U.S. was just safety considerations is what. And we had some scare tactics that came out. I forget who did it, but they were talking about bacteria is growing in non-alcoholic beer versus regular. And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. But, they were talking about inoculating it with bacteria. I'm like, well, yeah, that's, I mean, you're not saying any, this is just scare tactics here, but I'm still not sure. I know at one time we know the fellas at Athletic Brewing that do the, the non-alcoholics, and we had talked to them about draft, and they said that, not yet. We don't see it much. But all that said, we want to talk more about Guinness specifically and St. Patrick's Day. Colm, I think I'll start right out of the gate here. What is the Guinness Storehouse? What are you doing in Dublin for St. Patrick's Day this year?
Well, it's an 8-day spectacular, believe it or not. The very fact that St. Patrick's Day is actually on the Tuesday means we can kind of work before the weekend. We get the whole weekend, and then we get the Tuesday, and we get the day after St. Patrick's Day. So 8 days in all. We're expecting about 50,000 people coming through our doors. And like every St. Patrick's festival, really, it's a kind of a 7-floor takeover whereby we have music on the second floor, which is it's called Taste More. So basically showcasing the best of live Irish talent. We have Lyra, who's fantastic. We have the Bonnie Men, the Railway Boys, Need McChrystal. We also have art as well. We have an all-lady collective. It's called the Monarch Collective, and they're actually doing an artistic installation over those 7 floors, kind of an immersive installation. With food as well. We have a fantastic chipper, as we call fish and chip shops, from Galway, believe it or not. And they're heading east to Dublin. They're called Chipeen. They have these iconic chips. We also have Beth O'Brien. She's a big food writer. She's coming. We've got a DJ duo called Overmono. They're playing Paddy's Day, I believe. So, yeah, big things. And essentially, we got obviously roving traditional music. Musicians, you have, flash mobs. We've got brass bands. We've got choirs. The whole kit and caboodle. Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like something, quite an event.
Yeah, it is. And it's infectious, it's just that the vibe is just, you can cut it with a knife. It's fantastic. It really is.
Is it at the Storehouse, or is it separately at the brewery elsewhere? But there was an oyster stout that I read in something that like a special edition beer that was coming out just for St. Patrick's Day. I think it was an oyster stout made with regional oysters. I'm like, an oyster Guinness? Like, yes.
You're spot on. You're spot on there, Brian. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. Actually, yeah, that's actually in the Guinness Open Gate Brewery. So just to explain that's actually our second experimental plant that we've had in our history, which opened up in the 60s. And that was basically opened up around about 10 years ago now to the public, whereby they used the small scale brewery inside there. And essentially the brewers have got complete license to brew up whatever they like. So, styles that are not normally associated with the Guinness name. So everything from, red ales to barrel-aged porters to IPAs to we had a potato and shamrock ale, believe it or not, a number of St. Patrick's days ago. And this year, they have an oyster stout. Carlingford oysters, in actual fact, which is just north of Dublin there. But so that kind of like tells to the pairing of oysters and stout, because obviously Guinness is the foremost dry Irish stout, which obviously pairs very well with anything from the sea, or with cheeses or meats or whatever, because of that dryness. They're doing that as well. They're also showing the Ireland-Scotland game as well, which is a big one this weekend, and that'll finish off the Six Nations. And I think there's a few teams in the running for that, including ourselves. So that's gonna be a big one. So really looking forward to it.
Now, Colm, to show myself as a true American, I have no idea what the Six Nations are, or the Ireland, Scotland. So are we talking
rugby,
football
right?
here?
We're talking rugby. Sorry,
rugby. Oh, look at that. Brian there with that. Okay.
I have personal experience with that. For a time, many years ago, I worked in London, a very short time, but I decided I'm going to go up to Edinburgh just to check it out because I've never been. Turns out that was a Six Nations rugby thing going on there, and I couldn't find a place. I was basically homeless for a while in the streets until something opened up. I wound up getting a very expensive place in the Royal Mile so I could sleep somewhere that night. But I very much know exactly what that is. I also saw people taped down to a light pole. They wrapped the guy up, and he was tied up there, and there was a lot of shenanigans. There was a lot of fun happening in the streets. So that was very memorable.
People get emotional about it. There's no, no
yes, they did.
No
yes, they did.
doubt.
And I had no idea what any of it was about.
I imagine here, and in fact, I'm pretty sure it's saying that in a lot of the Irish bars here, you will get huge interest in it, whether they're Irish, English, Scottish, or Welsh, or even French, or even Italians, who are part of the Six Nations as well. So it's a huge deal for us.
Yeah, that's something. I think any major city you go to, you're going to have enough international transplants. There's going to be a culture there for it. We've got all of it here in Atlanta. We just became a soccer town a few years ago when we got our team here. Football. We got some World Cup coming to Atlanta this year, so that's exciting for us. But yeah.
Well, in actual fact, Tim, there's actually an Irish connection here, a slight Irish connection, because we're actually playing the Czech Republic, or Czechia, at the end of this month. And if we win that, we go into another game. And if we win that game, we'll actually be playing in Atlanta.
Okay.
Because that preliminary draw was made up already. We've one game in the United States. It's a big if we get through. We actually will play it in Atlanta, and the other 2 games are in Mexico, believe it or not. So anyway, there you go. Another Irish connection.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. It's a good town. We're proud of Atlanta, man. They have a good time here.
Yeah,
But,
they should have flown you down here to do the podcast. I don't know why
That's
they flew
right.
you to
Straight
New
to
York
Atlanta,
to do the
man.
podcast.
Straight to
but,
Atlanta.
Right down here would have been fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Colm, talking about, I'm sure you've seen celebrations all across the world as far as St. Patrick's Day goes. And one thing that I heard, it's just been a few years ago that I learned about it. You know, here in the States, we have corned beef and cabbage on St. Patrick's Day. That's a tradition. But I've heard in Ireland that you don't even know what corned beef is, much less it being a traditional dish there.
It's not really, to be quite honest with you.
Okay.
I think there's a bit of kind of, I don't know, maybe transatlantic appropriation or something going on there. Yeah, it's not as big a deal. Now, not to say we don't eat corned beef. I'm not saying that, but it's not a big thing. It's not really a big thing. Like a lot of other things that you might think. Like people would commonly say to me, you don't eat corned beef and you don't drink black and tans. So what's going on here? I said, no, that's really not a thing here. Neither of them are really a thing in Ireland, should I say, you know, in terms of these kind of like beer cocktails that you would associate more with the United States. So a lot of those are kind of US serves rather than Irish serves, you know.
Okay. And that, that probably ties in. Brian, what's the name of that sheet we found? Because that looked like it came from Guinness, and it may have been something they made for the American market to play into that, because it talks a lot about a lot of the half and halves that they do, Colm. And they have crazy stuff like Guinness and tomato juice, Guinness and Coke, just all of these. And
yeah, I have been asked about this before. Actually, you just reminded me that it wasn't anything rogue at all. It actually was a formal Guinness initiative that was actually run by our UK brewery, our London brewery, which we had for nearly 70 years, which was called Park Royal. It's in Northwest London. And 50 years ago, in actual fact, it was 1976, they brought out what was known as the Guinness Blacklist, which had somewhere in the region of 15 different sort of cocktail suggestions, combining it with Guinness, believe it or not. I think you're right about that tomato juice. I think that might have been called a red top or something like that, or a redhead. So I had to seek it out, and it actually does exist, or at least it did exist. And this was kind of, I suppose, riding the wave of a bit of a cocktail boom, which the UK was enjoying in the 1970s, and kind of getting involved with that. You had the Trojan Horse, which was Guinness and cola. You would have had, my particular favorite was actually Guinness and ginger beer, and that was called Top Hat, which is obviously a reference to Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers being the ginger.
Okay. Interesting.
It was actually quite inventive what they did there. I suppose the one lasting legacy from that would be the Black Velvet, which we pour quite regularly in the Guinness Storehouse, which essentially is 50% Prosecco or champagne, and then 50% Guinness. Now, when I say Guinness, I mean the carbonated Guinness extra stout, if you like.
Okay, interesting.
Which is what you would do it. Sorry, Brian, but what you would do at home. But what we can do, actually, if you have it at the bar, what we do is you can actually have 50% Prosecco, about 47% Guinness Original or Guinness Extra Stout from the bottle, and then we just top it up just with a little bit of draft, a little bit of nitro, just to give it that creamy head. But you got to be ever so dainty, in terms of the final serve there. Just a little flick off the top there, but there you go. Yeah, black velvet.
You got to be a skilled bartender there, because I don't remember the exact number, but it's like, what's the time for a proper Guinness pour? It's like 119.9.
You were 0.4 out there, 119.5 seconds.
Okay.
So it wasn't as long as you said, Tim.
See, you can get a Guinness quicker than you thought there. So.
There you go.
Yeah. And you guys put a lot of work into making sure everybody knows the proper way to pour a pint, correct?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the thing because it's a nitrogenated beer, it is quite demanding in terms of ticking these little boxes to make sure that you're going to get the perfect head, and it's going to look great, and it's to taste great. So, for example, you got to have the correct gas. You have to have the correct temperature in terms of the serve, which anywhere between 5 to 7 degrees Celsius. So you're around about the 40 degree Fahrenheit mark, 41 degrees. 2-part pour in terms of what we do is we would recommend you pour it right on the underside of the golden harp, which you'll get on your branded glass. 45 degrees, like a regular beer, and then you just slowly incline it when you get to the bottom of the golden harp. And just as it's beginning to cover that golden harp, which is probably about maybe a finger and a half from the top, you let it settle. And you leave it settle, and you wait until all of the bubbles go up to the top. They form that thick head. And then the second part then is poured at 90 degrees. It's a much more sort of a controlled pour, whereby the bartender should push forward, and you lessen the flow. You don't get the same degree of gas break out, and all you're doing is you're just gently pushing that head up to the top and getting that lovely dome as well. And you know, people do expect the dome. At least I expect the dome as a Guinness drinker, you know.
Absolutely.
You know, it always, even though it's a small sort of trivial, you know, facet, it does kind of tell you that this bar cares. This bar cares about the best pour possible, you know, whereas if you don't get one, you know, it's not the end of the world, but you are disappointed.
Sure. And if it's poured poorly enough, it's a noticeable difference in the drinking experience. And, you know, not specifically with Guinness, but with carbonated beers. We've got folks over here, Colm, that if their pint glass isn't overflowing at the top with beer, they feel like they're getting shortchanged, you know? So bartenders are holding the glasses to where they pour and generate no head at all on the beer, and all that gas is trapped in there. And, you know, the beer feels a little dead, you know? So pouring it properly, getting that gas there, getting the creamy head on there, you know, all of that is part of the experience for the beer.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a carbonated approach to serving, and there's a nitro approach to serving. You know, with the carbonated, you can move it up and down, and obviously that's going to generate a larger head. But that's not what you do with Guinness at all. It all has to be one, if you pardon the pun, fluid movement. You know, it has to be quite slow and quite assured. Ideally, the beer as well should be close to the nozzle, but the nozzle is never in the beer, obviously for quality reasons, but it should always be close. Whereas with a carbonated, you can have it at a height, you know, like pouring from a ladder, as you might say, you know, to generate that big head. You can't do that at nitro. And I always kind of explain that to people, because if you have that large fall, you know, the longer the fall from the nozzle, the more friction you're going to generate, and that's essentially going to manifest in, you know, a freckly, sort of bubbly, what we call frog's eyes, you know, on the top of the head. You want to avoid that. So you want to have it nice and close and nice and measured, and with a nice little dome at the top, you know. So it is a different approach.
I bet people don't know the care that goes into their pint there. You know, they don't know how much is going into it. Now, with that in mind, is Guinness still looking at, is the perfect pour is it the perfect pour? Do they still study it, or like, you know what? No, we've got this. This is we're good. We don't need to study this anymore.
No, I think we've developed the perfect pour. I mean, the head height should be 12 to 18 millimeters. So that's what we would determine. Let's say if you drink your pint, half an hour, 40 minutes, or whatever the case may be, that your head should lay at the top of the beer for that duration, say the average duration of the consumption of a pint, so it keeps the flavors fresh. Okay, but by the same token, you don't want to have it too high either, because obviously you're not going to drink that. That's it, you know, it's merely functional. That doesn't add the flavor. It protects the flavor, which is always in the dark body of the beer. So that's what we're always trying to impart to you know, visitors to the Guinness Storehouse that might not be so au fait with Guinness. That always wait for the bubbles to settle. When they get to the top, they form the seal, and that's functional. It's best avoided, you know, in terms of flavor.
Yeah.
So obviously that will, you know, by extension, lead to the perfect, you know, consumption of the beer, which is basically a big mouthful, you know. So the white should reside on your upper lip in the form of fetching kind of handlebar Santa Claus number, and
Right.
the dark body of the beer should be down below, and that's where all of the flavor is, the malt, the roast, and the hops.
Brian's got that mustache covered. He can it'll hold the creamy head perfectly for him. There.
I'm trendy.
So,
I'll get it nice and frosted. So,
yeah,
you know.
yeah. Now, talking about the big drink, we've had a trend over here with the youngins of splitting the G. Is that something you're familiar with? And do they play that game in Ireland?
Well, it's not a Guinness initiative.
Yeah.
It's something obviously we're conscious of in the market. I never turned drinking into a competition. Certainly not a great beer like Guinness, personally speaking. You should enjoy your pint. What I will say is that to consume it the correct way, it should be a generous mouthful. But split the G, I suppose it kind of tells to how much the consumer, how much the Guinness drinker is kind of invested, in the beer, that they have their own take on it, But certainly, I don't see it as a competitive thing myself. I just enjoy my.
Just
beer.
enjoy your pint. Gotcha.
I never hear a gauntlet being thrown whenever somebody hands me a pint of Guinness. I just enjoy the beer. So.
Do you have any theories as to why Guinness is such a hot thing with Gen Z right now? Like the 60-40 and splitting the G, like there must be some thought or some research of like, we're just taking off, we're just killing it with this younger crowd. Like, why? I'm like, because all of these things are like not initiatives from Guinness. They're kind of, we've brought Guinness into this. We've created this thing with Guinness. So, do you have thoughts as to why the success, the incredible success?
I think first and foremost, without tasting the beer, it's an extremely photogenic beer. It's a beautiful beer. I mean, the Guinness Surge itself, it's just, it's a spectacle. It really is. It was once described to me actually by a visitor. I think she was from California, in the Guinness Storehouse, and she described it as the world's greatest lava lamp. I thought that was beautiful.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah,
that was pretty good. But we call it the Guinness Surge because obviously the bubbles are surging upwards and forming that particular head. So that's number one. I think the aesthetics, it definitely has that appeal to it. Guinness is a great tasting beer. You guys know that, and all the people I would imagine on the listening to the show, watching the show today, would agree as well. It's such a well balanced beer, that it's not too roasty, it's not too sweet, it's just Goldilocks. It's just right. It's got a great balance between all of the key flavors. And plus as well, you have that sort of, there's a kind of a cultish side. What I mean by that is that as a cult heroes, there's something legendary about it. And I think a lot of that is down to the iconography of Guinness, particularly through the advertising, particularly through, the television commercials that we ran through in the 1990s and then the early 21st century. They were really, really cutting edge. And what I like about the iconography and the commercials is that you're not spoon-fed into the message. You have to work out the message yourself. Guinness kind of just gives you the tools to get to that message, and then you work it out yourself, if you know what I mean. So sophisticated, great tasting beer, and it just looks like $1 million. That'd be my take on it, guys.
That sounds reasonable. Yeah. Anywhere you go, we've got a few pubs around here that are, Irish or British or what have you. And you know what? They always feel like somewhere you need to chill, basically. It's not, you're going out, you have a pint, you get you some fish and chips, get you a nice pour. And like you talked about, the art on the walls, the Guinness advertising, iconic, wherever you go, anybody who knows, beer a little bit is going to know, the toucan, lovely day for a Guinness, what have you. Everybody knows that. So it's definitely, memorable. Everybody's got some memories of it. But,
sure.
You mentioned the taste of Guinness, not too sweet and that. And I've cooked a decent bit with Guinness. And one thing I love making is like a Guinness stew, a beef stew with that. But are there any recipes you know of, or is anything that's your favorite to do with Guinness if you're not drinking it, maybe cooking with it?
If I'm cooking with it, sometimes I'll put it into a stir fry. Actually, yeah,
Okay.
which goes
All right.
which actually goes well. Yeah, with some soy sauce. And actual fact, I also bake as well. So I do a little bit of sourdough baking, and I do a Guinness rye sourdough actually. So with about 10 to 12% rye. The rest are kind of a combination of strong white, and I put in Guinness with toasted sunflower seeds. So they're basically dry fried sunflower seeds, so they marry very well with that roasted barley element to it as well. I think rye and Guinness were made for each other also, but that's
Yeah.
that's my take on it. One other thing I will say as well about the appeal of Guinness as well, I think a lot of people read into the success of it as well. That it is this, it's based on this 4 acre brewery that went on to become arguably Ireland's biggest success story. So I think there's an element of that as well, and probably a fair amount of Irish pride. And even if you're not Irish, I would say maybe a sense of awe that this brewery has become such a globally recognized brand that comes from a very, very small part of the world.
Yeah, and that's something, Guinness has been around hundreds of years, literally at this point, correct?
Yeah,
When
yeah.
was the brewery founded?
1759.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
here in America, we're youngins. We don't have anything here that's. I guess that we'd be right at that. So you talk
Mhm.
about over in Europe, Ireland, other places there. Hundreds or even thousands of years old, and most of our stuff here. If we've got something that's 150 years old, that's pretty ancient here. So having that many hundreds of years of history, under your belt is pretty impressive. Now, is there what's coming up at Guinness? What's new from Guinness?
What's new? Without wishing to tease you guys on
All
the
right, yeah.
on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, because I don't want to tease you with stuff that you don't have. But I suppose the latest development that we've had on our side of the world would be Nitro Surge,
Heard of it.
which I'm sure you guys are aware of, which essentially is using ultrasonic pulses to to agitate the beer and to knock those bubbles out of the solution in the pint can. So that was a huge step forward for us in the last few years, sort of 4 years or so. So that's it. But we have a fair amount on our plate, I think, with Guinness Zero, to be honest with you, and just the extraordinary demand of Guinness Draft Stout. But there's always something around the corner. We're always trying to do things better, better flavors. So yeah, Nitro Surge is probably the biggest development that I could tell you the last few years.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, Colm, we know you got a tight schedule. I'm sure you're tired from all the running you've done today, but we appreciate you coming and joining us. Colm O'Connor, Guinness Storehouse Brewery from Dublin. Thanks for joining us for St. Patrick's Day. Hope you get you a nice pint and enjoy it this evening.
Will do. Lovely talking to you guys. Thanks
You
for
too,
inviting
Colm.
me on.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Cheers.
Bye now. Sláinte.
Sláinte. Good stuff. Awesome, Brian. That was fun learning a little bit about Guinness.
Yeah.
I feel like anytime we have somebody on, there's 1,000 questions to ask, and you just can't get to everything. So, but it's nice to hear some about what Guinness is doing, and when you're a historical brewery like that, what do you need to do? I mean, everybody needs to innovate, but they've got it locked down pretty good with a pint of Guinness there too.
That's true.
So,
Yeah. I was wondering, like, oh, he's going to tell us the oyster stout is coming to everybody. Nah, I knew that was unlikely to happen, but
everyone getting a pint.
Yeah. I'd buy some. But
I do like a good oyster stout, though. So I mean, the brininess in there, and that's if you've never had an oyster stout, it doesn't taste like you're eating oysters, really. So you get some of that, a little bit of silky mouthfeel from it, a little bit of just a brininess, really.
Yeah.
So. It tastes slightly oceanic, I guess, but you're not going to drink it and think you're shooting oysters or anything.
No. But it is quite enjoyable. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyhow, Brian, before we move on, as always, we've got some more chatter to talk about, the lore and legends of St. Patrick's Day. So we'll get into that. But before we do that, how about we give a shout out to our good friends over at Truck and Tap?
Yeah, it's about time. It is the beginning of drinking season here in the South. That means warmer weather, St. Patrick's Day, and pollen. We can't do much about the pollen part, but the other two are why this weekend is the right weekend to be at Truck and Tap. If you're listening to this the day the show drops, head over to your local Truck and Tap right away and drink in the good weather. It's supposed to be high 70s-ish, and celebrate St. Patrick's Day. They're going to have a party there. You can expect drink specials and all sorts of festive shenanigans. But let's take a look at the tap list and what I like to call my Truck and Tap beer picks for the week. At Truck and Tap Woodstock, I'm going with Creature Comfort's Double Dry Hop Cosmic Debris in honor of all the pollen lighting up our skies and dusting our cars. This 11th anniversary double IPA delivers big citrus, melon, pine, and starfruit flavors, and it sounds delightful, and I've had it before, so it is delightful, but this is the latest iteration of it. At the Duluth location, I'm getting one we've talked about on the side on our Discord chat. Boulevard's Irish Cream Barrel Aged Stout. Officially, it's categorized as a double milk stout, and it rings in at a hefty 11% ABV. So, don't order one of these thinking you're going to get something like a Guinness, because it's definitely not that.
Definitely not a Guinness.
Yeah, and it's made with milk sugar imported from the makers of Five Farms Irish Cream in Ireland. So, I've never heard of an imported specialty milk sugar, so this is crazy. But color me intrigued. I'll drink it, even if milk sugars don't always agree with me. But at Truck and Tap Alpharetta, my pick is Aperitif Pils by Moody Tongue. I love a good, refreshing German Pilsner, but what really sold me on it is the description. They say it's biscuity, and it has a croissant and French baguette aromatics, and there's something about that that is incredibly funny to me. I think it's just me envisioning people, running a baguette across their nose like it's an oversized cigar. But I'll bet it's a great beer, I'm sure. And finally, at the Lawrenceville location, I'm going with Guinness. But I'm sure you can see this one coming. In fact, the world's most popular dry Irish stout should be on tap at all Truck and Tap locations by this weekend, and I recommend you get at least one while you're out and about. So there you have my beer picks for the week. Go out there and have a beer or two. And as always, if you'd like to see the full tap list before stopping by, take a look at truckandtap.com. The taps do change quickly, and you never know what great new beer might go on, like Guinness, perhaps. And if you'd like to see what the food trucks are serving and what events are happening, your trivia, your karaoke, your St. Patrick's Day parties, you can also find that at truckandtap.com. In fact, everything you need to know can be found at truckandtap.com. So check that out. And thank you to Truck and Tap for your support.
Thank you, Truck and Tap. You guys are the best. Brian, I was just remembering, I got that Irish pub up by me who I forget their name right now, but they do a pretty solid St. Patrick's Day. I remember they had some nice Americanized St. Patrick's Day grub there. So we will... it may not be true to the Irish spirit, but we're going to eat some corned beef and cabbage over here.
I definitely am.
It's going to happen. There's going to be some potatoes in that. Throw a little mustard in the mix there. So, and have a good time. I think it's interesting though, talking to Colm, that when he said we don't do the black and tan, I thought that meant they didn't mix at all. But then he talked about the is it Black Velvet? Was that the one he was talking about?
I think it's the Black Velvet.
So I'm like, okay, so so they're doing some mixes there. They're just not playing around with the black and tan there.
And we didn't really ask it, but about it. But I guess there's a whole negative connotation to the name too, which that sometimes comes up.
There's. I know you know how Americans are, man. Look, we're trying to have a good time.
We are.
We may do some offensive stuff because we're Americans, and we, on one hand, we don't mean anything negative by it. On the other hand, a lot of us are too arrogant to care.
We're arrogant and drunk, so
offend
we just don't
anybody.
care.
So we apologize for that. But Brian, St. Patrick's Day, always a good time. And we pull up some stats, we pull up some history, some lore, legends, lies, whatever there may be. So that's, we talked to Colm before we got on the air. And one of the things we'd heard through the rumor mill was that Guinness put a little soured Guinness in each batch that they brewed and kind of brought it forward from there. And he was telling us, he's like, look, I cannot verify that they do that. And he said he even talked to their archivist there to ask about that, and there's no written history of that they put a little bit in there. He did say that he knew at one time they would blend like a little bit of an aged batch into newer batches there, but nothing about it being sour. So if you've heard that out there, Guinness has no record of that happening. Maybe it happened, so long ago they forgot to write it down, but it's not official Guinness knowledge.
Yeah,
there.
we've reported it, but it probably is the lies that are told.
We've
by
been lying.
Drunks in the pub. Yeah,
we
so
have.
It's been repeated over and over
We've
again.
been known to do that. So, but Brian, statistics, St. Patrick's Day 2025, we know how it cranked out there. So what exactly turned up in St. Patrick's Day in the US of A in 2025?
So I did a bunch of digging in 2025. A lot of these are based upon predictions, but it's a mix of what actually happened in predictions. So we'll get into it. About in 2025, 61% of U.S. consumers were estimated to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with a total spending of around $7 billion. On the other hand, draft beer volume at bars and restaurants saw a significant decline of 11.3% during that same party weekend compared to the previous years. The interesting thing to note here is that consumers spent about the same amount of money as the previous year. They just ended up drinking less beer, which seems to indicate they either upgraded their beer choices. Maybe they got Guinness instead of Miller Lite or whatever, that kind of thing. Or inflation took a bite, or a combination of the two. So people were spending the same amount. They just weren't drinking quite as much. In 2025, Guinness's volume share of all beer poured nearly tripled during the holiday weekend compared to its year-to-date average. Non-alcoholic beer sales experienced a massive 112% growth during that holiday window. And I think there were a lot of people out there zebra striping. Maybe they were switching back and forth between Guinness and non-alcoholic Guinness. But it was a crazy year last year in terms of sales. Now, if we want to get into the parties, which is another key aspect of this, New York City hosted the world's largest St. Patrick's Day parade in 2025, again, with approximately 2 million spectators and 150,000 marchers over the course of nearly 6 hours. The parade has been running since, I think, 1762 is the number I've got, or the year I've got. I think that's correct. The 2025 St. Patrick's Festival in Dublin, Ireland, drew an estimated 500,000 attendees and featured 4,000 street performers, 12 marching bands, 7 large-scale pageants, a few other things I forgot to write down, but a lot more stuff. And 1 in 5 attendees were international tourists. So it's a lot of international tourists there in Ireland for that. So all told, the festivities in New York were roughly 4 times the size of the celebration in Dublin. And people sometimes call St. Patrick's Day the Super Bowl of beer, and New York City did, in fact, host a Super Bowl-sized party in terms of all the people attending. So, but looking around, while New York City, their parade is credited as being the largest in the world, it clearly is. Chicago's not far behind it in terms of the number of people attending. Some sources say Chicago gets around 2 million visitors during the St. Patrick's Day holiday. That maybe even more. Maybe theoretically there are more people visiting Chicago than New York. I'm not 100% sure on that. Those numbers are a little sketchy. But apparently the unseasonably warm weather they had last year really boosted the attendance too. So as a footnote, the Chicago St. Patrick's Day Parade turned 70 this year, I believe. So that's a pretty neat little footnote. Yeah. So we also, Boston is up there. They put up some big numbers with their parade. It drew an estimated 600 to 800,000 spectators, which means there may have been more spectators in there for the parade than actual residents of Boston. I think Boston has a residence of about 650,000, and so it may have been as high as 800,000 people in there just for the party. And Savannah, Georgia is also a big St. Patrick's Day party town, drawing between 400 and 500,000 spectators, and that's definitely more people than live there. I think it's like 150,000 residents of Savannah, Georgia, and that puts it in 4th place nationally as far as I can tell, and on par in terms of attendance with Dublin, but probably not nearly as large scale in terms of the actual celebration. And Savannah, of course, is famous for a big open container celebration zone, so their beer sales are just always off the charts. So it's a pretty drunken weekend there. So that is what happened in 2025.
Savannah would be packed out with 500,000 people. Like that would be a little brutal there. So, but I've heard, I haven't, in all the years that I've been in Georgia, I have not made it over there. I have not made it to Savannah for St. Patrick's Day, and I have not made it to Helen for Oktoberfest. So, like the two places to party here. So crazy stuff, man. We've done a lot of, Oktoberfesty or German eating and drinking activities in Helen, just never around Oktoberfest before. So interesting. Well, Brian, not only do we have stats, we got predictions. So they're looking ahead this year, what may happen for St. Patrick's Day. So how do they think it's going to stack up this year to last year?
Yeah, what I keep running into every year around this time is the National Retail Federation survey, and they say that 60% of U.S. consumers, about the same number as last year, they plan to celebrate St. Patrick's Day this year. They expect to spend a record average of $47.45 per person, the highest per person figure in the National Retail Federation survey history. So it's going to be a big day, big year for spending for that. And despite St. Patrick's Day falling midweek, a Tuesday, I believe it is, which is that historically suppresses turnout for the holiday. So people are still planning on getting down with this. The top spending categories for 2026 are supposed to be food is going to be the highest, 54%. Got to get your corned beef and cabbage. Beverages come in second at 44%. Apparel at 26%. So everybody's got to get their hat and their green shirt and all the neat stuff. The decorations, 25%, followed by candy, greeting cards, and gifts. It's thought that the weather is going to have a huge impact on how St. Patrick's Day turns out this year because, last year it was really warm in most places and that boosted attendance. But this year people are they're calling it weather weary with a lot of cold and snowy and icy conditions. So if the weather is not good where you're at for your particular celebration, it's likely to suppress the turnout and perhaps more than it typically would just because people are sick of it. They're over all the cold. So the weather is really going to have a huge impact on how things actually go in 2026. I think it's going to be nice for us down here in the South. I have no idea how it's going to be up in the North.
So we're right now, as we record this, Brian, we did go back to a little cold snap. Like we'd been around 80 degrees for several days, and we're at like 50 here right now. And I even got a notice on my weather app that we got a frost advisory for the night. So.
Jeez.
So who knows what's going to happen, man? 82 degrees a couple days ago, then we have a nice freeze again. So the lovely weather here. The early spring is always like this, man. We get a couple, super warm days that are really nice and a couple cool ones. I would love it if we were just temperate. Let us hang 76 degrees year round. I'm good.
I think for the day this show drops, the day I think the biggest party day for us, I think it's hitting like 80s. I think it's going to be
sunny,
like super
sunny and warm.
Yeah, it's going to feel like early summer, late spring. So
if your weather
be gangbusters around here,
where you are, is not going to be pleasant, come join us in Atlanta. We'll grab a pint and some corned beef.
That's just smart. You should just do that.
Yeah, it's just smart. It's just good business, Brian.
That really is just good business.
So absolutely, Brian. We've talked about it a little bit here with obsession with St. Patrick's Day. And again, Americans are known for this. If your country has a holiday that involves alcohol, we're going to adopt it.
We're all in. Yeah.
That's, our borders may not be open to everyone, but if your holiday is a drinking holiday, then, I'm Irish. I'm Mexican,
right.
Whatever it may be if there's alcohol involved. So, Cinco de Mayo, St. Patrick's Day, we're gonna crank it out and we're gonna make it our own because that's what we do. But some states are a little more obsessed than others, man. What areas of the U.S. are the most St. Patrick's Day obsessed?
Yeah, this is fun. So I got a list from Yahoo about which states, like the various states, have the most obsession with St. Patrick based on their search data, their bar density, which is an interesting metric, and also their beer drinking habits. But it also had which states are the least interested. I'm like, wait, there's states that aren't interested? Yeah, apparently there are. Rankings were determined by the weighted score, 50% based on Google search results, 25% by bar and restaurant density, and 25% based on beer consumption. Massachusetts, New York, and Illinois, this is not surprising, are the top three most obsessed states. It's driven by their high search volume and their iconic traditions, like Chicago dyes their river green, New York's got the big thing, and Boston's got all the people coming in. They all have these crazy parades, but New Hampshire ranks 6th overall, but it boasts the highest beer consumption stats for the entire list. So just on beer consumption alone, they're given high marks. Rhode Island and Oregon, of all places, stand out specifically for their high concentration of bars and restaurants per capita. So they're drinking a fair amount. And I'm from Oregon. I know Kel's downtown Portland will just be killing it. There'll be tons of people in there drinking. And I used to go there during St. Patty's Day myself, way back in the day. But Colorado scores big for beer events and special beer releases. So around this time, they're going to be a lot of dry Irish stouts, I'm sure, hitting the markets and a lot of parties. As for the states that are the least obsessed, the Deep South, is specifically Mississippi, Alabama, and Arkansas, show the lowest engagement for the holiday. So they aren't feeling St. Patrick's Day.
I'm not surprised by that information.
Yeah, and Mississippi is in the last place in terms of all of them, in terms of their interest. One place that actually is pretty interested but gets knocked down because of just volume, density of bars and other things is Utah is apparently very into St. Patrick's Day. What knocks them down in the rankings is just they don't have as many drinking establishments, and they're just a little tougher on drinking. So it's just not as big a drinking area. But apparently their interest in terms of just raw search results is pretty high as well. So it's kind of neat.
Right.
Yeah,
there they go. They're curious. They're St. Patty's Day curious.
They're alcohol curious. So we're all teetotalers here, but we're interested in what alcohol might
curious.
Bring to it. What can booze do for us?
Right. That's someone's parents walks into a kid hovering in his room. Are you looking at porn? No. You got a pint, sweaty pint up on the screen. How dare you?
So dirty.
He's going to have to pray. He's going to need to talk to the bishop about that.
Yeah.
So. Good stuff, man. Well, Brian, St. Patrick's Day, a little background here on the holiday. So tell us a little bit about, I always enjoy talking about St. Patrick because I think even though we're celebrating St. Patrick's Day, I think we skip right over St. Patrick a lot of the times.
Yeah, typically. As you know, March 17th, inconveniently a Tuesday this year. It's been observed apparently as a religious holiday for over 1,000 years. And according to a video I watched some years ago on the History Channel, they thought the holiday began not long after St. Patrick's death. Historically, people would attend church in the morning, they'd drink, their dance, they'd go eat their traditional meal of Irish bacon and cabbage. Apparently, that's what the video says. But about St. Patrick, so he lived during the 5th century. He was probably born in 390. The story goes that he was kidnapped and brought to Ireland as a slave at the age of 16. He escaped and later returned to Ireland. And the story is that he had a dream that told him he needed to return. So return he did. He's credited with bringing Christianity to Ireland. And according to the legend, he did this by using the Irish clover to explain the Holy Trinity to the locals. He is believed to have died on March 17th, 461, which is 1,565 years ago. Although Patrick is venerated as a saint in Ireland from the 7th century onward, he was never really formally canonized by the Catholic Church, which is interesting. He basically became a saint by popular opinion. The big reason, I guess, is he was never formally canonized as a saint, is simply there wasn't a formal process to do so when he was around. So it wasn't until 1630 that the 17th of March was added to the Catholic Book of Prayers as the Feast of St. Patrick. So a lot of interesting tidbits there. I think I've got some other stuff that's, about him. I'm going to put this in. It's a little controversial, but of course they say St. Patrick was not Irish. If the story is true that he was brought over as a slave, then obviously he wasn't. He was born in Roman-occupied British Isles, and he may have either been an Italian named Patricius, which some people believe, or of indigenous Celtic descent named Maewyn Succat. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
I bet at least a pint you're not saying that right.
Oh, no chance.
Yeah,
but according to the BBC or the History Channel or the combination of the two, they seem to side with the indigenous Britain theory, but there are also others who say that that's not likely the case, and I think there's some people that think he may have been Italian or of Italian descent. I don't know, but obviously he didn't drive snakes out of Ireland. That's what he's famous for. Ireland never had snakes. The snake legend is probably a metaphor for paganism being driven out of Ireland. So, the fun thing that I always like to report is when the first St. Patrick's Day on record was performed or done. Records show that the first St. Patrick's Day parade was held on March 17th, 1601 in a Spanish colony. It was now St. Augustine, Florida. And I was there last year, and for some reason, I was like, I know something about St. Augustine, and I couldn't remember what it was. It was this. it was this. And
There's something important about
and I
this
went to an
city.
Irish pub when I was there, and it still didn't. It still
Terrible.
didn't hit me. Yeah.
Terrible. Interesting,
Indeed.
man. Interesting. And you know, Brian, something that people may not know, this is a religious holiday. And for a long time, I think it was until the 1970s, in Ireland, the laws mandated pubs were closed on St. Patrick's Day. So
Yeah.
this holiday that we associate with just absolutely, you know, getting your Guinness on, was a pub closed day. Closed pub day in Ireland.
Could you imagine going back in time and traveling there and just like, everything's shut down, nothing's
Like,
happening?
come on, it's St. Patrick's Day. You
Yeah.
can't be.
What are you guys
closed.
doing?
What do you
Yeah.
quit messing with me? Pour me a pint. So, yeah, Brian. You know, and of course, there's the stereotype things. Leprechauns don't really have anything to do with St. Patrick's Day, but they're out there. Pots of gold, leprechauns, all the things. Again, we don't mean to offend you, but we might. We might. And
Yeah.
we're just going to keep going with it. So,
Kind of tied into the pre-Christian beliefs in fairies and tacked on by Americans, or so the story goes. And
yeah.
the interesting thing is the leprechauns that we typically see are really the unflattering caricatures of Irish immigrants from around the time of the potato famine. So they really just reappropriated those, like those horrible drawings, and just like, oh no, those are now leprechauns. So like they're fine.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
you know, we do a lot of that stuff where like people forget it was offensive. It's like no,
Oh.
it's like it's like no, man, that's just a little thing we do for like Ireland St. Patrick's Day. It's you know,
No, they're leprechauns. It's
it's-
great. They
it's a
love it. Yeah,
leprechaun.
no, it's good.
It's
It's
a
fine.
fun.
Yeah, it's
So,
fine.
yeah. Well, Brian, that about wraps it up for our St. Patrick's Day show. We thank everybody for joining us. Again, thanks to Colm O'Connor for coming and hanging out and talking with us some about Guinness there. But we definitely hope that y'all have a good week. Again, if you dig what we do here, we would love for you to go and tell a friend, share us on social media. If you really enjoy what we're doing, stop by patreon.com/beerguys. We'd love your support, and we'll get you out some cool swag, and we'll get you in our Discord server. You get the invite to the after party when we hang out and have a couple more drinks after the show. But with all that said, we hope that you have a really good week, and don't forget to drink local. Sláinte.